Hello and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. I want to just review with you a little bit on the essence of music and what you have to know to be able to play music. And then we're going to go right straight to a march, which I just wrote, and I'll dissect it for you. And but just remember, when you're playing music, there's an awful lot going on. When you learn how to play, it's a struggle to remember everything. But then as you get more and more used to it, it comes so natural, you don't even think about it. If I start to play something, I don't stop to think, I've got to breathe, I've got to finger the notes, I've got to tongue the notes, I've got to phrase the notes, I've got to know what this sign means, I've got to know what that sign means. I don't even think about it. You just do it naturally. When you read a book, how do you read a book? You don't read and say, well, there's a capital L and O-O-K, so that word must be look, and that's coming before the next word, and the next word says U-P, that means up, look up, and then there's a sign, you know, like an exclamation point, so it's like a command almost, look up. You don't stop to do that, you just read it. And when a period comes, you stop. And then it's followed by another sentence that started with a capital letter. You just go. You don't even think about it. Now, I can remember thinking about it when I was a child reading Dick and Jane books. Dick runs, Jane runs, Dick and Jane run. I'm old enough, so I went through all of those books, and I think some of those books are now coming back. But as you learn and you grow and you learn more and more about music, you look at it and there it is. It's like a book. You read it. That's why it's called reading music, because you are really reading it, and it really is a language of its own. So what I'm going to do is just remember, when you just to show you some fundamentals here. You pick up the instrument, you curve your fingers, you do not flatten them. You keep the left hand on top, you keep the right hand on the bottom. And even if you're not using some of these lower keys right away, you keep your hand positioned so you can easily get to them. You can't do that if your hands are flat. You can't cover the holds right if your hand is flat. And remember, as you're reading the music, you're going to be looking at the time signature to see how fast it goes, and if it's 3/4 or 4/4, how many beats to a measure it has. You're going to look at the key signature. Does it have sharps? Does it have flats? What does that mean? What key does it put it in? A lot of times I write in the key of G, which has one sharp. For one thing, F sharp is pretty easy to play, and the other thing is it's hard sometimes, especially for beginning students or elderly that have trouble with their hands, or they're arthritic, or something's wrong with their hands. It's hard for them to hit the lowest note. Sometimes you would think it would be the high notes that would be the hardest to play, but that's not really the case. A lot of times it's the lower notes because you've got finger stretches, and if your hands have problems, if you have a problem with your joints or something, or if your hands aren't very big, you may have trouble stretching. So I usually make D, the low D right here, the lowest note if I can. And then occasionally I throw in the C or C sharp, so you do get those finger stretches. But for beginning students, I like to make it as easy as possible. Then you have to remember as you're playing that when it says F sharp in the key signature, every time you get to an F, you automatically sharp it, because that's what the key signature says to do. And so a lot of my music, and I'm going to show you this music here, this march that we're going to be doing, it's 4/4 beats to a measure. That means there are 4 beats to the measure, and a quarter note, which is symbolized by this 4, gets 1 beat. And so this is, if I skip this first measure is not a full measure. But that's all right, because I'm using it as an introduction, and an introduction isn't necessarily a full measure. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. But you're starting here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, because that's how you count the eighths. 1, 2, 3, and 4 and. Now I didn't put, what I should have done was I should have put a marking. Those should be eighth notes, but when I play it, I'll know that. The E is 1 beat, 2 beats for the half note, And then, of course, you have your eighth notes. So at any rate, you start to read the music. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this, and I'm going to play it once. And then I'm going to show you how I would change it if I wanted to add different signs to it. What signs could I add, and what would be the difference in the way that it's played? So this is a march. It's not a fast march, but it is a march. And so I could play it fast, but I don't want to play it fast. So if you'll just watch the music and listen to me play it, this is how it goes. And that's the whole march. If I really wanted to play it up to speed, it's fine at that speed, but if I wanted to play it really fast, and that would be it. So, and you would, if you're marching, if you were using this as a march and you were marching along in a parade, you would play it faster. But marches don't always have to be fast. So we've played this. Now let me change it and show you some markings and what happens when I add different markings to it. Here I've got repeat signs. And this is just a simple repeat sign. So I start here, and there is a repeat sign, but I play it. This is exactly like what I played before. You know, there was no changes at all. And then when I get here, that tells me to go back to the repeat sign, and the repeat sign is right at the very beginning. So I play the whole thing again. And then when I finish here, the song has stopped. So essentially, I play it twice. That's what the repeat sign will have me do. There's no first ending. There's no second ending. It's just a simple repeat. So when you see the repeats, you have two lines or a heavy line with two dots toward the left. That's the repeat sign, and you go back to where you have the heavy line or two lines with two dots to the right. So you're going from one to the other, and you play the whole thing again. Now, if I wanted a first or second ending to it, I could have a first or second ending and make the thing shorter, but it doesn't matter. I'm just trying to show you what these signs are so that when you see them, you will understand what they are. So let me turn this page again. Now here I have the repeat sign, but it doesn't go all the way to the top. I have the whole song, it's exactly like it was before, but when I get down here, I repeat back here. This is the repeat sign, and it goes up here. You don't play that. Now, that kind of makes it, in a sense, a nicer song, I think, because I'm only going to, let's see, I think I'll play a little bit of it so you get kind of a taste of it. When I play it, let's supposing, well, I'll try it from the beginning, but when I get down here and repeat, I'm only going back here. I'm not going back and playing this whole thing again. I'm only playing here to here, and that's the end of the song, and it's also the end of the repeat. So that's what I'll do. the song is shorter. You don't get the whole song a second time. You get part of it a second time. But that's actually a good way to end a piece, is to take part of a last line or last line and repeat just those. That's the way that's the way some people end their songs anyway. They don't have a special ending, but they take a section of what's already been played and play it a second time. So that's also the repeat sign. Now let me turn this again. So this time we have a DC to fine. What does that mean? We go back to the beginning. That DC always means to go back to the beginning. So we are going back to the beginning. And you see this word here, refrain. Now, with a refrain, it just means you're playing this again. That's all it means. But many songs, when you have a DC, you go back to the beginning and it says refrain. It doesn't always have to do that. It doesn't always do that. But it does do it here. Now, you'll notice here I have a second note. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I also have this second note here. It would be all right to play either one, but I think what happens is if I go back to the beginning, I may want to end on that second note, because if I play these notes again, that's not a good ending note, and I'll show you what I mean. Whoops, I'll show you what I mean. I'll start, let's see. I got a wrong page here. I'm going to start right on this E, and I'm going to go down here, and then and I'm going to forget that's there, but then I'll play this, go back to the DC, well, that's back to the beginning, and end on this note. But, well, maybe I should just play it from the top. I'll just play it from the top. Do you see how that sounds? If I end on that B, I just played these notes, and I end on that B, it sounds like it's supposed to go further. If I end on the G, it's like it's coming to a natural conclusion. There's just a difference between now that sounds like something more is about to follow. But if I use that lower G, that sounds more like an ending. So it's just the way that I wrote it. It's just the way that music is written. So for that DC to fine, DC goes right back to the beginning. You play the whole thing again. When you get to that DC, play the whole thing again, and then you stop when it says fine. That's the way it is. Now you could have that DC, you could have that fine up here or up here in any other place, wherever that happens to be. That would be the end of the song. It seemed more natural for me to put it here than to bring it up, because that's kind of like cutting the song out in the middle. Excuse me. So let me turn another page here. Here is the sign. We've talked about the sign. you have a sign up here. Well, you play this whole thing like I've played it. It says DSL Fine. You go back to where the sign is. Now the sign is right here, so in essence you're going back to the beginning and you're playing and you get down here and you end it. And here again I have that lower G so that when you get there it sounds more like it's ready to come to a conclusion if you play that G rather than that B. Now I don't want to go through the whole song again, but this is it. You play this line, this line, this line, this line, and this line. You don't bother with that until you get here where it says DSL Fine. That means go back to the sign and play to the end of the song. Here is the sign, so you go back to the beginning. The sign just happens to be in the beginning. And then you play this line, this line, this line, and then when you get here, play that G. I've got it in parentheses, but play that G, and that's the end of the song. Now, could I use a repeat? Well, if I use a repeat, you've got to play back to where the repeat is, and I don't want to go that far. And so therefore, using a sign and using a fine is much better in this case than using a repeat, because if I use a repeat, I'd have to go to wherever the repeat was. So if the repeat was here, I'd have to repeat it from this point back down to here, but that would leave out this line. So I want to play the whole thing, but when I come back, I don't want to play the whole thing. I only want to play part of it. So therefore, I put my fine wherever I want it to stop. And you can do that with the sign. You can't do that with a repeat sign. So let me change this. This is the same thing, but I put my sign down here. So that means when I get to the DSL Fine, I don't go back to the beginning, I go back to wherever the sign is, and the sign is right here. So I would start with this measure and go down here, and that's the end of the song. So I basically am repeating most of two lines. I'm not playing these two, and when I get to the Fine, then I'm not playing the last line either. So if you're reading the music, you would say, well, okay, this is in the key of G because it's got one sharp. It's 4/4 time. You play this, you play this, you play this, you play this, you play this. And when you get to DSL Fine, you go back to the sign, which just happens to be right here. You don't play those two, then you play this, and your fine is right here, so you stop right here with that lower G note. So you're really shortening up the piece, but you see, you can make this piece whatever you want it to be, or I can, as a composer, make this piece whatever I want it to be. I can start any place, I can stop any place, but in order to start and stop any place when I go back, I have to know what the signs are, and I have to read the signs and put the signs in the right places. But that's the difference between a DC and a DS. The DC brings you back to the beginning no matter what. That's what you have to do. And you play to the fine. But sign you can put anywhere as long as you have enough space to run into the fine. I mean, I couldn't put the sign here. You're supposed to play to the fine, to this fine. So it has to be somewhere where I can run into the fine. But that's the way that that's written. So you can write it in different ways. The sign is good because it's adaptable. You can put it wherever you want. And that's good. And the fine is adaptable. You can put that wherever you want too. So you really do have quite a wide range of options that you can use in order to play this music. You'll probably have it memorized by the time. Okay, so that's all I want to do in terms of checking with the fine, the DC, and that kind of thing, and the placement of it. DC goes back to the beginning and plays to the fine. The sign goes back to wherever you want the sign to be, but not necessarily beginning, although it can be in the beginning. It doesn't matter. It's wherever it happens to be put. And you play to the fine. And this way, you see, you are actually not doing much in terms with first endings, second endings, and we've been over that because a lot of music you have first endings and second endings. You play the first ending, repeat, and play the second ending, and that's the end of the song. So it doesn't matter. You can have all kinds of things. I could have repeat signs 2 or 3 times and then still use the sign or still use a DC and add that on top of everything else that I'm doing. And what you have to do is just learn to read it. But if I take you step by step and you can read it, then you won't have any trouble reading signs. Now, bear in mind, there's an awful lot more that's going on with the music. You've got the dynamics. How fast do you play? How slow do you play? How loud do you play? How soft do you play? Do you have a gradual increase in your loudness as shown by a certain caret sign? And I haven't put any of this in here because what I want you to do is to get used to the signs, but I'm adding. I'll do a piece where I add all of that. And you just read it as you go. And when you read it as you go, it starts to make sense to you. Do you think that composers spend hours and hours and hours rewriting and rewriting and rewriting because they want something to be played 2 or 3 or 4 times? No, they use the signs. Now, they do have to spend a lot of time writing, but they can shorten their writing if they use the signs appropriately and you can read them appropriately, and so you can play certain things twice or play certain things even 3 times. There's actually a little sign, I've shown it to you before, where you just repeat the measure before it. But you can repeat the measure before it 64 times if you want. You can either keep making those measures with a repeat on them, or you can put 64 on top of a little slash that means repeat the measure before and repeat it 64 times. See of the savings that you have in terms of the time that you write, as long as you can read the signs and you're not confused by it. Well, I think it's kind of too late to start something else, so I'm going to close it here, but we'll continue on this. And if you do have an instrument and you're following along, if you have any questions, email me and I'll answer you on the air. And also, just if you can just follow along with what I'm doing, it will teach you how to read music and it will teach you how to play. So we'll close it here. Please join me next time.